Hey, welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, welcome. My name is Stella and I make videos talking about today's technology and tutorials on how we can use them. Today I'll be talking about what is Java, what makes up a Java program, and the different variables used. So, let's get started. So why learn Java? Java is a class-based object-oriented programming language, and it is a very common language used by developers to create applications. Java is also known as a write once, run anywhere type of language because after the source code is compiled into bytecode, you can run your Java program on any machine that has a Java virtual machine, or also known as JVM. The JVM will take your bytecode and turn it into machine code to where your machine will be able to process it. Since Java is object-oriented, it is made up of classes and methods. A class is basically a container for a bunch of related methods. Each method contains a small piece of code with a task to do. A method can receive user input and also return a value. For example, if the class was a car, the different tasks could be calculating the maximum speed, finding the fuel efficiency, and also being able to detect the engine oil level. All this could technically be put in one big block of code. However, it's not really clean code, and it's not efficient, especially if you're comparing cars with different specs. Object-oriented programming helps lessen the redundancy with methods. To make a method, we need an access modifier, which is basically like setting permissions to allow other methods and classes to access our methods and classes. Then we need a return type, which is what the method is going to return to the caller of the method. Next is the name of the method. This goes for all programming etiquette. Whenever you're naming something, make sure that it is descriptive to what it is doing. The parentheses are allowing the method to pass input from the caller. This could be left blank if the method doesn't require any input. The open curly bracket on the same line is to signify the start of the method, and the closing curly bracket is to signify the end of the method. Lastly, the actual code will go inside the method and it is indented once. To make a class, we need an access modifier. We need the word class to define that it is a class. And lastly, we need the descriptive class name. Like the method, we need an open and closed curly bracket to signify the start and end of the class. All the related methods will be put inside the class and also indented once. When we combine the classes and methods together, it will look something like this. Just a note, every Java program has to have a main method, and their purpose is to tell the JVM that this is the starting point of the code. Now that we know how a Java program is structured, let's create a Java program. I will be using Visual Studio Code, and there are many different code editors that you could use. However, if you would like to follow along with what I have made a video about how to set up and install Java in Visual Studio Code, and I'll link it above. So now let's go on over to Visual Studio Code. So now that we have Visual Studio Code opened up, I have opened up my Java folder, and this is where I'm going to store all my Java files in. To create a new file, we will go and click here, create a new file, and I will name my folder math.java and press enter to save. The reason why I like Visual Studio Code is that it comes with something called IntelliSense. IntelliSense helped me automatically make my first class, which is named Math because math is the name of my Java file. We can see here that our access modifier is public, which means that other methods and classes can access this class. Then we put class here and then our class name, math. Next, we'll need to make a main method. So we go here and it is already indented for us. In Visual Studio Code, all I need to type is main, and then IntelliSense will give me the option of making a main method. So let's go over what all these parameters mean. The first one is our access modifier for our method, meaning that any method or class can access the main method. The main method of your program should always be static. And basically what that means is that you can access this method without a creation of an object. And it can be used as a constant variable or method that is the same for every instance of the class. Void is a special Java keyword that basically means it does not return any value. Main is the name of our method, and the string args right here is the parameter we are passing into our main method. Java uses naming conventions where every class name starts with a capital letter, and every method name starts with a lowercase letter first, and then every word after that it starts with an uppercase. For example, if I were to make another class name, and we will go public void where it doesn't return any value, and I want it to say my string, my method would be spelled as my with a lowercase m. However, method will be capitalized, and we will add the parentheses and the curly brackets. However, for classes, let's say I wanted to name my class not just math but math operations. Operations, the O would also be capitalized. Now that we have the basic structure of a Java program down, let's move on to defining variables. So there are two types when defining variables. There are primitive types and also reference types. Primitive types store simple values such as booleans, numbers, and characters. However, reference types store complex objects such as data and messages. So let's start off with primitive types and how we can define them. The first on the list is byte, and we'll name this tinynum, and then we can give it a value of 1. Whenever we're naming a variable, we always have to make sure that we have a semicolon at the end. A byte has a byte size of 1, and also their range can go from -128 to 127. The next variable is short. In short, we can name it medium number, and we'll give that a value of 10,000. A short has a byte size of 2, and also it can range from -32,000 to 32,000. Then we have int, which is probably the most commonly used one, and we'll name this integer large num and make it equal to 1 million. Integers have a byte size of 4, and it ranges from -2 billion to 2 billion. Then we have long, which is a huge number, and we can set this equal to whatever we want, which is, let's say, 500,000, or honestly 5 million. Longs have a byte size of 8. I just wanted to point out that these underlines aren't errors, they're actually just warnings saying that I haven't been using these variables yet. So these 4 primitive types are actually integers, and the only difference between them is their ranges and byte size. For example, if I wanted to set byte to, let's say, 100,000, then I should be getting an error because you cannot convert an integer to a byte. An integer is just too big for a byte to handle. However, if you're just dealing with small numbers, let's say between -128 to 128, then a byte would be sufficient enough. Another thing you have to be careful of when you're defining a long variable is that Java will assume that your long variable is actually an integer variable. For example, right now we have 5 million, and we can see that 5 million is inside of 2 billion, so that's why we won't get an error. However, what if we change the 5 million to 5 billion? Then you can see that we get an error, and this says the literal of 5 billion of type int is out of range. In order to change this into a long, all we have to do is go to the end of this and either type in a capital L or a lowercase l. And that will let Java know that you're specifying that this number is a long and not an integer. I usually like to put a capital L because a lowercase l looks like a 1. Now on to decimals. So there are 2 variables for decimals. The first one we'll look at is a float, and we'll name this small decimal, and we'll give this a value of 10.99. However, we are getting an error right here. This error says that we cannot convert from double to float. This is about the same kind of error when we are trying to declare a long variable. Java will assume that every single decimal is a double instead of a float. So in order to change that, we go to the end and we will type in either a capital F or a lowercase f, but since I did capital L, I'll do a capital F here, and now our error has gone away. The next decimal variable would be double, and we'll name this large decimal, and we'll give this, let's say, 100.987, and close that off. A double has a byte size of 8, so the same thing applies. If your decimal is less than a byte size of 4, you should use float, and if it is greater than 4, then you should use the double variable. The next primitive type is character, so we will go character and name that letter and give it a value of A. Characters have a byte size of 2. If you're defining a single value, you should just use single quotes. However, if you're defining multiple values, then you should use double quotes. The last primitive type is a boolean. So we'll say boolean is true, and we'll set this to true. So now let's move on to reference types. Reference types store complex objects like data and messages. When we declare reference types, it is different than declaring a primitive type. For example, if we want to declare a reference type date, we can type in date, and you can see here there are different options for the same reference type. We can use either Java utilities, or we can use the SQL database. For instance, we'll be using the Java utilities, and when we go up, we can see that our date has been imported. That's just another great feature that IntelliSense has. It will automatically import the things that you need. Now when we go back to date, we can name our date to date, and then we'll type new date. The new is used to allocate memory for a variable, something that a primitive type would not need. Another reference type would be strings. Strings are declared differently than other reference types. To declare a string, we'll type string and name it message and give it a value of hello world. Because it is a reference type, there are many different things that we can do with this message. First, let's print out this message and see how it'll look like on our terminal. So all we have to do in VS Code is press sys, and because of the IntelliSense, it will automatically do your system.out.println for you. And then all we have to put in the brackets is message. To run the Java program, if you're on a Mac, the shortcut is to press Ctrl-Option-N, or if you're on Windows, Ctrl-Alt-N to save, compile, and run the Java program. So let's do that. And it is compiling, and it's saving, and then it should print out Hello World. And there we go, Hello World. Now that we can print out Hello World, there are a few things that we can do to play around with the message itself. For example, if we want to see the length of the message, we'll do message.length. And then when we run this code again, it'll give us the length of our string Hello World, 11. So if we want to count it out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. If we want to check that our string ends with a certain character, all we need to do is do message.ends with, and then let's put a D in there, and then we should be given a Boolean value of true or false. In our case, we should be given a value of true because Hello World does end with a D. If we want to see what our string starts with, we can just check starts with, and then we can run this program again. And in this case, we should be getting a false because our string starts with an H and it doesn't start with a D. And it does end up giving us a false. Another cool thing we can do is that we can change our whole string into all lowercase. And what we need to do here is just do message.to. You can see here to character array, to uppercase, to lowercase. We would like to change it to lowercase. So to lowercase, and then we can run it. And then now our Hello World, instead of having a capital H and W, it is changed all to lowercase. Reference types have many different functions that you can use. And to browse through them all you need to do is type in your reference type name, and then you type dot to browse through all the different functions available. Here we have ends with, indent, index of to find where the character is, and we have is blank, is empty, returning Boolean values, and many more different functions. The last thing I want to touch upon is that strings are immutable, which means they are unchangeable. To show you, let's go back to making this message to lowercase, and we'll print out our message again just to see if our message is changed to lowercase. So when we run this, the first line was changed because we had message.to lowercase. However, the second line, when we printed out message again, did not change because right here we declared that Hello World was supposed to be spelled like this. Just because you call the .to lowercase will not change the actual variable itself, but it will change the output once. If you want to change the actual value of the message, you would need to declare that again. So for instance, if I want to change this message to all lowercase, I need to put the Hello World. And then when we run this again, it gives us both lowercase Hello Worlds. And that concludes my introduction video to Java. Thank you so much for watching my video. If you liked this video and thought it was useful, make sure to give it a big thumbs up. I make videos like this every single week, so if you like what you see, please subscribe to my channel. Also, if you have any comments, questions, or even suggestions for future tutorial videos, please make sure to leave them down in the comment box below. Other than that, thank you again for watching my video, and I'll see you next week.